a pleasure to be here. As always, you've put together a great conference, and hypertension particularly is so important nowadays. So I'm going to go on to my topic, which is the role of CT in evaluation of the coronaries, aorta, and the renal arteries. So arterial hypertension, we know it is one of the largest proportion of cardiovascular mortalities worldwide that is accounted for by hypertension. And in fact, the AHA has said that 77% of patients with first stroke, 69% with first heart attack, and 74% with heart failure have a BP over 140/90. There is a substantial variation in the cardiovascular risk among hypertensive patients, and the European Society of Hypertension and the ESC recommend risk stratification of every hypertensive patient. And the heart, we know, is an important target organ of systemic hypertension. While LV hypertrophy may be well seen together with LA dilatation on the CT, there are a few features that are better seen on both echo and MR. So let's start with the cardiac CT, which is my topic. So if we look at the impact of hypertension, it's not only on the myocardium, but also on the coronaries, and atherosclerosis and downstream ischemic heart disease is what we're looking for, because hypertension is one of the major risk factors when we're looking at ischemic heart disease. Starting with risk stratification, we know the first step of a cardiac CT is the calcium score, and coronary calcium is not an aging phenomena and occurs exclusively in the atherosclerotic arteries. The calcium score is an automated software. It gives us the distribution, density, weighting, and size of the coronary calcification. And in fact, it is superior in predicting cardiac events in asymptomatic women, men, and diabetics over the Framingham risk score. This is irrespective of ethnicity or color, and irrespective of the burden of dyslipidemia, and regardless of how dyslipidemia is defined. Going on to guiding management in these hypertensive who do land up with coronary or epicardial disease, we know that the spectrum of disease can be all the way from normal to severe and critical disease. And while at one end of the spectrum, we don't need to send the patient to the cath, but at the other end, we want an urgent cath. And so we want the chosen test to be one that can reliably rule out coronary artery disease at one end. And at the other end, we want to have a very accurate diagnosis for extent, severity, anatomical, and flow limiting lesions. As far as ruling out coronary artery disease, we know the diagnostic performance of coronary CTA is outstanding. And if you have coronaries that look like this, you have a negative predictive value, which is over 99%. CTA is also reliable to detect the diseased coronaries. And in this patient who's 42 years, hypertensive, but non-smoker, non-diabetic, and is an intermediate pretest probability, can CTA actually even have an incremental benefit over the gold standard ICA? The coronary CTA demonstrated that there was a significant LCX stenosis and a plaque in the RCA. The patient was referred to PCI, and you can see that between the CT and the ICA, there is excellent concordance as far as stenosis detection is concerned. And so in detection of the culprit lesion, both modalities are excellent. Compared to all other non-invasive modalities for detection of coronary stenosis, CTA is better for detection and exclusion of obstructive coronary artery disease. But finally, what we're really looking for are plaques, because plaque rupture accounts for 70% of the fatal acute myocardial infarctions. And what we want to know is which is the vulnerable plaque. A vulnerable plaque, as was seen in this patient, is a low attenuation lipid-rich intraplaque core with a positively remodeled the plaque with spotty calcification, a napkin ring sign, and they also show serial progression if you do subsequent CTs. Disadvantage of CAG is that while it is the gold standard for evaluating the coronary lumen, it's only a luminography, whereas with the CTA, what we see is a stenosis and the cause of stenosis. So it's actually luminography and more. And the atherosclerotic plaque actually predicts better than clinical findings and stenosis. Further, beyond just looking at the epicardial vessels, in the management of ischemic heart disease, and particularly in these patients who are hypertensive and come in for evaluation, we want a hybrid imaging, and CT has the advantage because it can not only look at the anatomical evaluation of the coronaries, but also the functional evaluation to understand the impact of stenosis in terms of ischemia, infarction, LV function. And CT allows both static and dynamic evaluation to look for myocardial perfusion for the detection of a perfusion defect. And then we can do stress and rest CT perfusions. So we can have very similar findings if we're looking at a complete reversible ischemia, as in this case, or whether it's a non-reversible in the presence of a scar. So combining a CTA with a CTP actually has incremental benefit, and the accuracy rises to almost 95% with a negative predictive value of 100%, a sensitivity of 100%. Recent advances also allow CT-FFR to be evaluated, where we can have calculation of the non-invasive 3D FFR of the entire coronary bed from a typically acquired CCTA. And in fact, the FFRCT is superior to all other non-invasive modalities for lesion-specific ischemia. Last but not the least is predicting outcome. And like I said, while LV hypertrophy, even myocardial fibrosis, if you do a dual energy delayed scan, and left atrial dilatation can all be evaluated on the CT. Besides, CT also looks at regional and global LV function for long-term prognosis, besides evaluating wall thickness, perfusion defects, and delayed enhancements. So CT is your potential one-stop shop for imaging in hypertension and in subsequent downstream ischemic heart disease. Now, we know hypertension impacts the arteries, and in particular, the aorta is most frequently affected. The need is to have a comprehensive assessment of the aorta. We want to have plaque assessment for quantification of plaque volume. We also want to look for aortic wall syndromes, which are a constellation of life-threatening diseases. And there are other complications such as cerebrovascular, arterioembolic disease, retinal, renal complications. The hypertensive aortic disease may manifest as a catastrophic emergency, and their time becomes critical, and optimal management requires a very prompt and accurate diagnosis. In the diagnosis of aortic pathologies, what we have is we have a large number of imaging tools from echocardiography, MR, angio-TE, but CT today is the modality of choice. The reason being it's a very large volume coverage, a short acquisition time, a high spatial resolution, thin slices with homogeneous contrast enhancement and isometric acquisition, which allows post-processing of source images. The protocol used is a gated study of the thoracic aorta and a non-gated study of the abdominal aorta. And then you want to make sure that you measure it in systole, because differences come between systole and diastole. Again, how do you measure? The 2010 guidelines talk about the aortic diameter between external surfaces to avoid the confounding by intra-aortic thrombus or atheromas. And oblique imaging can overestimate the aortic dimension, so it's really important that the center lines are properly drawn. The aortic root can be assessed, and you need a true double oblique plane in order to evaluate not only the annulus, but the sinus of Valsalva, the sinotubular junctions, the ascending aorta, and the relationship to the aortic root. Thoracoabdominal aorta, all the way to the iliofemorals, can be assessed very clearly in the presence of hypertension, and particularly in these patients where you're looking for aortic aneurysms. The upper limit of normal for aortic dimensions is as follows. So I'm not going to go into it, but yes, we have to look at when they exceed this. The acute aortic syndrome is a gamut of conditions. We're talking about aortic dissections, intramural hematomas, penetrating aortic ulcers, and ruptured aneurysms. And some of these can be really life-threatening. So when we're talking about the acute aortic dissections, CT is the modality of choice because of its high diagnostic accuracy, almost in the range of 90 to 100%. We can see the evaluation of the entire aorta and its branches with the flap, the entry, the re-entry, extension to branch vessels, end organ ischemia, and extravasation. So we have classifications, which could be the Stanford classification, which type A involving the ascending and descending, or type B, which involves only the descending. The DeBakey classification is also there. Here you can see a Stanford type A, where involvement of the ascending aorta is seen. You can see the dissection flap, the true and the false lumen. The entry tear is delineated very well on CT. This is a type B dissection, where you can see it's just distal to the left subclavian. And it's also important to differentiate the true and the false lumen. And this is very easily done on CT, where the true lumen is invariably smaller. The origin of the visceral arteries most frequently comes from the true lumen. It has a faster flow and is surrounded by calcifications. Secondary complications include hemopericardium. Then you can have malperfusion of the coronaries, the cerebral, the visceral, abdominal, or limb vessels. So here you can see there's a Stanford type A dissection with the left coronary involvement. Intramural hematomas and the penetrating aortic ulcers need to undergo serial imaging, because they may show regression, progression to dissection, aneurysm, or persistence. So it's really important to keep watching them very closely. This is a type A intramural hematoma with a penetrating ulcer. Aortic aneurysms are also well known in hypertensives, and these are permanent focal dilatations of an artery having a more than 50% increase in diameter, while the fusiform aneurysms is what we usually see, but saccular aneurysms may exist in the event of fungal infections and various other causes. Abdominal aortic aneurysms, again, the annual
Dr. Mona Bhatia, please 1 minute more.
Is related to the diameter. And so you need to know when to treat and when to watch. And then you need to look at what is the diameter. EVAR is an accepted alternative to open surgical repair, and pre-op evaluation involves a very detailed study in order to make sure that you have success of the EVAR. A renovascular hypertension is basically a secondary cause of hypertension. You may have causes such as a renal artery stenosis. You may have fibromuscular dysplasia, which is frequently seen in the mid to distal portion of the renal artery. You may have renal artery dissection, which is the majority are extensions of the aortic dissection, and these are isolated renal dissections where complications of endovascular procedures or blunt abdominal trauma may exist. Obstruction can be dynamic within the renal arteries, particularly if you have a dissection. So here you have a dynamic renal artery stenosis, where between the systolic and diastolic, you can see how the flap actually enters the renal artery. Life-threatening complications include organ ischemia. Here, the right kidney shows malperfusion, and in the one to the right, you can see malperfusion in the left kidney. So these also need to be evaluated. The page kidney refers to a systemic hypertension secondary to extrinsic compression of the kidney by a subcapsular collection, like a hematoma, seroma, or urinoma, and compression of the renal arteries, either major or microvascular arteries, leads to renal hypoperfusion with release of the renin. So the diagnosis again here depends on CT for improved resolution for imaging of small subcapsular hematomas and retroperitoneum. So finally, all I'd like to say is the CT has a significant role in the evaluation of the coronaries, aorta, and the renal arteries in hypertensive cardiovascular evaluation. Thank you so much for your patient listening.